We begin, however, with Tom Joscelyn and Bill Roggio to talk about the battlefield, not about the Iran deal, the battlefield that will be considerably darkened once that cash flows through Tehran into the hands of the fighters. Bill, a very good evening to you. Bill Roggio and Tom Joscelyn are with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's Long War Journal. The Islamic State, much active, theoretically an adversary of Iran, although there are doubts sometimes. The Islamic State is saying that the claim that its emir for the Khorasan province is alive after he was declared dead, dead several times, whacked with a drone or an attack that was effective. What is the Khorasan province, and what is the significance of him popping back up? Good evening to you, Bill.
Good evening, John. Yes, the Islamic State is saying that its emir, Hafez Saeed Khan, is indeed alive. He was reported killed by Afghan intelligence over the weekend. He was supposed to have been killed in a U.S. airstrike in Nangarhar province, actually on Friday. This statement actually comes from a guy named Abdul Rahim Muslim Dost, who was one of the first, if not the first, in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region to jump ship and join the Islamic State. He's a longtime jihadist, detained at Guantanamo Bay, et cetera, He just has a long pedigree. He's a very significant individual for the Islamic State, and his words carry a lot of meaning. So if he's saying he's alive, the chances are very, very good that he's alive. And also, a statement, the Islamic State apparently released a statement from Hafez Saeed. Now, it's not dated, and it may be an old video, we don't know, but they refer to him as he's alive. As we've seen in cases in the past, it's really difficult to know unless we see him, holding the proverbial newspaper that's dated for today. But the odds are good that he's alive. What the Islamic State Khorasan province, and the Khorasan province, what that is it's basically the Islamic State in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and neighboring countries. That's what the Khorasan province.
It's Islamic State in the subcontinent.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's basically the analogous to Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. It's he did confirm that their spokesman, what used to be a spokesman for the movement in Taliban in Pakistan, as well as the deputy emir, he did confirm that those two were killed. So the U.S. is launching airstrikes in Nangarhar province against the Islamic State, where they've gathered to battle the Taliban. We got a little intra-jihadist feud going on in Afghanistan, and that's, so the U.S. is actively targeting the Islamic State in Afghanistan, Pakistan.
The measure of chaos, it's generally understood to be anarchy. We associate it with the Middle Ages. It's where we are through this part of the world. And we go to Tom Joscelyn, who for many weeks has been reporting and for longer than that has been very clear about what is Arar al-Sham. There's a op-ed in the Washington Post most recently, written by a man who's described as the head of foreign political relations for Arar al-Sham, Labib al-Nabhas. Tom, a very good evening to you. What is Arar al-Sham?
Arar al-Sham, in reality, is an al-Qaeda front group. It was established very early on by senior al-Qaeda members to basically serve as their acceptable public face in Syria in the fight against the Assad regime. And also what Arar al-Sham is trying to do is trying to popularize the jihadist ideology that al-Qaeda adheres to into the mainstream Muslim population, something that hasn't been mainstream for a long, long time. They're trying to make it mainstream. And this op-ed that appeared in the Washington Post was a complete and total whitewash. Reading through it line by line, so many facts came to mind that actually undermine every claim that was made in the piece. It's hard to really distill everything. But the bottom line here is that Arar al-Sham, the author of this Washington Post op-ed, tries to claim that Arar al-Sham doesn't have any al-Qaeda links. This is utter nonsense. Back in late 2013, we first reported at the Long War Journal that, in fact, Ayman al-Zawahiri, this is the head of al-Qaeda, his top man in all of the Levant, including Syria and down through the Levant, was a guy named Abu Khalid al-Suri. That Abu Khalid al-Suri was, in fact, the most important or one of the most powerful guys in Arar al-Sham, a founding member and a senior leader in Arar al-Sham. And subsequently, we've uncovered and reported other al-Qaeda leaders who were in Arar al-Sham's senior-most ranks. Now, This is very, very important because these are guys who are answering to Al-Qaeda senior leadership, who are taking direction from Al-Qaeda senior leadership, and this shows their game plan for Arar al-Sham inside Syria was always to have a group that wasn't going to be branded as Al-Qaeda, it was going to be branded as something else, and it was going to try and make the jihadist ideology popular mainstream in the fight against Assad. And this is very dangerous because now what we have in the pages of the Washington Post, in my view, is effectively disinformation on behalf of our enemies.
We'll come back to how that is going to work with the Syrian civil war in just a moment. I want to check off a stunning photograph that's up at the Long War Journal of men looking like Iraqi fighters standing in front of a U.S. M1 Abrams tank. Bill, you describe this as Badr organization. Is that Muki Sadr from the old days, Muki Sadr the rebel in Badr City outside of Baghdad?
No, this is Hadi al-Amiri, his faction of Islamist fighters. They are he's pretty much loyal to Iran and Quds Force. He was actually a rival. Badr organization was a rival of the Mahdi army, but they all, at the end of the day, reported to Iran's Quds
So
Force.
Badr fought the Sadrs, but they all report to Tehran. They're all surrogates of Tehran.
They have been in the past, and at this point in time, they're not rivals any longer. The Badr organization actually worked with the U.S. for a while. They were one of the largest militias to integrate with the Iraqi government during the U.S. surge and whatnot. And it was thought that they were on the path for good. But once things started falling apart and the U.S. disengaged, Badr went back to their old ways.
You have the photograph of them standing in front of an M1A1 tank. Has the U.S. Army passed over this equipment to them? Have we approved a militia organization to carry on armored tanks?
No, very unlikely. What is more likely, they either took it back from Islamic State, which I kind of doubt because I imagine they would have touted that, or it was passed to them by the Iraqi military. Also in that photo, you could see one of the fighters the one on the photographed on the right. He's holding an AT-4 rocket, which the U.S. began. I believe it's a Finnish or Swedish-made rocket that the U.S. anti-tank rocket, and the U.S. is supplying them to the Iraqi military. So what you could see is Iraqi military is just passing along weaponry to the Shia militia.
So when we deliver equipment to the Iraqi government, it is passed on quickly to the guerrilla organizations, the militias that work for Tehran.
That's absolutely correct, and you could bet that Tehran is getting a look at these. Even though the equipment's dated, you could bet that they're getting a look at our hardware.
This is a fresh idea, Bill. Once we called it Lend-Lease. We sent the arsenal of democracy into Russia's hands to fight the Hitlerites and into the British hands to survive. Now we bypass our allies and give it right to the enemy.
That seems to be the case, but the U.S. isn't treating these Shia militias as an enemy as much as they're treating them as a nuisance.
Bill Roggio and Tom Joscelyn of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. When we come back, Tom Joscelyn will have much more to say about how this false face of al-Nusra works in the Syrian civil war to Tehran's disadvantage, ? To Assad's advantage, ? In other words, you need a scorecard to follow this. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. It's a vast battlefield from the Hindu Kush to the Atlantic Ocean. All this territory at risk. The turmoil is constant. There is no single way to describe the contest except for anarchy, breaking down sovereign states, attacking capitals, and looking to involve the United States in some fashion in boosting the attempt of the two large jihadist organizations, Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, against each other and against the capitals they're making war against. Tom Joscelyn and Bill Roggio of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Tom Joscelyn is telling the story of Arar al-Sham that is placed in an op-ed in the Washington Post. Arar al-Sham is fellow traveler, I think is the old-fashioned way of saying it. Fellow traveler with Al-Qaeda. It is Al-Qaeda. However, why does Arar al-Sham want the U.S. aid? Where are they going with this? Tom, what is the blue sky for Arar al-Sham?
Well, I don't think that Aurora Sham wants direct U.S. aid. What I think they want is they want to shift American public opinion, and they want to shift American policy to be more anti-Assad, more anti-Iran in Syria, and to essentially turn a blind eye to what's going on within the opposition and who's leading the opposition at this point, and not be so focused on that. I think that's really their goal here. And the bottom line is that, we've been arguing for a long time. It's fine to want Assad gone. It's fine to want to, affect change in Syria. But the idea that you're going to turn a blind eye to an organization like Aurora Sham, which is seeded with senior al-Qaeda operatives, and to our view was al-Qaeda's original play, actually, in Syria before the emergence of the al-Nusra Front, which is now al-Qaeda's official branch, really is foolish. And it's really naive policy to basically think that you're going to ally yourself, even in the short term, with a group like Aurora Sham, because all you're doing is basically giving over or allowing al-Qaeda to achieve its strategic goals in Syria, which are, I think, in the long run, much more dangerous to us, of course, than some of the other things that are going on.
Are they presenting themselves as the moderate opposition that we've been looking to finance for years? I saw a testimony recently where the Pentagon admitted they had less than 100 fighters under training in some camp somewhere in Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, there are some moderate fighters in the South, in what's called the Southern Front. I mean, moderate is a relative term, of course. But even in relativistic terms, Aurora Sham doesn't come close to becoming moderate. There are some pockets even in the northern part of Syria. But overall, if you look at what's actually driving the strategic gains against the Assad regime, it's the hardliners, it's the jihadists, including Aurora Sham and the Nusra Front. Now, the most important thing here, John, is that the easiest way to think of this is that there are several coalitions of groups throughout Syria that are fighting the Assad regime. And in several of these coalitions, the al-Nusra Front is leading them. This is al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra Front is al-Qaeda. They try to hide themselves, with the branding of the Nusra Front in Syria. And every time, their right-hand man in each one of these coalitions is Aurora Sham. Every time. And, of course, the spokesman in the Washington Post doesn't say anything about this. Doesn't say anything about the fact that Aurora Sham and al-Qaeda are fighting hand-in-hand, day-to-day, every day against the Assad regime. This makes them blood brothers. These are guys who are basically bound by blood that they're spilling on the battlefield. The idea that they're going to somehow separate themselves from al-Qaeda or be a moderate alternative to al-Qaeda is absolutely ludicrous, given the fact that they are dying and fighting and advancing now on a day-to-day basis alongside al-Qaeda, because, in fact, they are part of al-Qaeda, and that's really the reality here.
Bill, you have a piece up about the Caucasus sending jihadists, Islamists, to Syria and pledging allegiance to something called the Islamic Caucasus Emirate. What is this, Bill? Because we've talked about the Chechens fighting in Syria before.
Yeah, Islamic Caucasus Emirate is basically al-Qaeda's branch in southern Russia. It's been fighting jihad in southern Russia for well over a decade. It was declared, I believe, in 2007. And what happened here is we had the influx of fighters from the Caucasus fighting in the Syrian revolution or Syrian rebellion, and a large faction of them have remained loyal to the Islamic Caucasus Emirate, although a faction did declare to the Islamic State. This one commander, so you had the death of the Islamic Caucasus Emir just a couple of months ago, and the Islamic Caucasus Emirate within the last month has named its new emir. So one of the top commanders in the region in Syria, his name is Salahuddin Shishani. He has declared his allegiance to the Islamic Caucasus Emirates. Now, he actually was the leader of this large group that was called the Mujahideen Army, or the Army of the Immigrants and Helpers. He just was ejected from the leadership there, but he still has a large faction that fights for him inside Syria. His declaration, he's a prominent commander, and his declaration is a nice little boost for the Islamic Caucasus Emirates, because it's had a lot of defections itself to the Islamic State over the past
so this
half year.
Shishani is re-upping with al-Qaeda.
Yeah, and he has to, because he has been highly critical of the Islamic State. He's made some statements that I have to imagine he can't walk back, especially given the brutality and the Islamic State's penchant for being unforgiving to those that have opposed it.
Think of these as competing wolf packs, and Bill and Tom are able to discern their commanders and their anxieties on the battlefield in Syria where there's lawlessness. This is anarchy. This is the Middle Ages. This is dystopian fiction is what we call it in literature. It's a landscape that's not meant to be reality where warlords rule and there is no time for anyone who is weak. Everyone's a victim or the victimizer. Now we go to Al-Qaeda fighting the Islamic State in North Africa, the Islamic Maghreb. The Al-Qaeda has an outfit all across North Africa, but recently Tom's been reporting of combat in Derna, Libya. That's a large city associated with Islamists for many years in Cyrenaica province. What's happened, Tom?
Well, John, one of the things we've talked about in the past is that, the media misreported last year that the Islamic State and its new branch in Libya had overtaken or had overrun the city of Derna in Libya, which has long been a hotbed for extremism and jihadism. In fact, on a per capita basis, Derna has probably contributed more jihadists to the world than just about anywhere. But the Islamic State did not, in fact, overtake the city last year, as was reported by several leading media outlets. They had local entrenched opposition from other jihadist groups that have been there a long time, all of which are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. And what happened last month in June is that the Islamic State effectively picked a fight with these groups in Derna. They went after the senior leadership and killed a couple of the senior leaders of these groups in Derna. And it was a fight that they picked that they could not win. In fact, they lost very quickly.
30 seconds, Tom. 30 seconds.
What happened is that the Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups essentially kicked the Islamic State out of the city. And to this day, this is sort of something that's not been really widely reported in the press, but this is a turf war that Al-Qaeda won over the Islamic State that's very important to watch.
Tom Joscelyn, Bill Roggio, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State tangling. These are feuding revolutionary groups in the battlefield, the anarchic states of North Africa and the Middle East, the Levant. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.